Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome indeed to this afternoon's iOB business webinar. I hope that you are well. I hope that you're having a wonderful week, and I do hope that the weather's a little bit better where you are. I'm tuning in from Scotland today, so if you're anywhere based in the UK, the chances are you're having the same weather. Those of you further abroad might be having a better time, so fingers crossed. So it's a pleasure to have you on here as always. What we're going to be discussing today is how you can minimize your risk as a startup. Okay, it's a very common question that gets asked in the industry these days is, well, if I'm looking to start a new business, how can I make sure that I can do that as risk-free as possible? Okay, so we're going to talk through with you 3 separate topics today on how you can minimize your risk. Okay, so complete and total transparency as always. You can never completely eliminate risk, but there are certainly ways that you can mitigate it and reduce it. Okay, so for those of you that have never met me before, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Ben. I'm the resident business coach here at iOB Business, and I present these webinars every other Wednesday. So I'm just going to give it another minute or two to let everybody join us today and make sure that everybody is tuned in. What I'm going to do in the meantime is run through how these presentations work. So if you've been with us before, you'll be familiar. If not, this is how they work. Okay, so we do a brief introduction with myself. Once again, my name is Ben. And then what we do after this is we dive into a webinar, and we're going to do that for around about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, this segment is going to be a presentation on how you can minimize risk as a startup specifically today. And then after that, we're going to dive into a Q&A. Now, these Q&As usually last about 5 minutes, and you're more than welcome to ask any questions that you have related to marketing, business, or the webinar itself. Okay, so what we also do, just as a little added bonus, is we give away maybe 30 seconds to a minute after each topic to let you take your time, write down any notes, and ask any questions that you may have. So just whilst we're getting prepped and getting ready, if you do have a notepad next to you, well done. If you don't, please go and grab one, because there may be some things that you want to write down during today's session. Okay, so just whilst we're getting set up, I am going to open up the presentation screen. Okay, perfect. So how you can minimize risk as a startup. Now, just before we get kicked off, if you could please let me know, can you hear me okay? And can you see the presentation screen okay? You shouldn't be able to see me on video anymore. You should only be able to see the presentation on screen, and the audio should be coming through nice and clear. Okay, so if you can go ahead and let me know. Excellent. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we're all good to kick off then with today's presentation. So once again, for those of you just joining us, today's presentation is about how you can minimize risk as a startup. Now, as a business coach, I get asked this question a fair amount, as I'm sure you can imagine, but this is also a much more common question across the industry as a whole. There are many, many new businesses launching every single year, and almost every single one of those new business owners wants to know how they can minimize risk. Now, as we discussed, you cannot completely eliminate risk, okay? As with any investment of time and money, you cannot completely eliminate risk, but you can certainly be intelligent, you can certainly mitigate it, and you can certainly make sure that you're making the right moves at the right time, okay? So your presenter today is myself. My name is Ben Porter-Smith, and I am a professional business coach. I specialize in working with small businesses and helping them achieve stability and growth, okay? So this is my day-to-day, this is my passion, this is what I love to do, and this is why it's a pleasure for me to be able to present this webinar to you today. All right, so today's session, we're going to cover 3 things. Number 1, we're going to talk about starting small. Okay, I'm going to talk you through exactly what this means in more specific detail, but for now, just bear in mind, we're looking at a startup, we want to start small. Number 2, we want to learn as you go, okay? A mistake is only a mistake if you don't learn from it. And 3rd, partner with the right support. Okay, so 3 excellent topics here and 3 excellent things that we're going to talk about today. Beginning with number 1, okay? Notepads at the ready? Here we go. First thing I'm going to share with you, okay? I want you to take educated estimations. Now, this is a broad term. I completely agree. What I'm referencing specifically when I ask you to make educated estimations is an estimation or an approximation is always a guess of some kind, okay? But when we're talking about guessing and approximating and estimating, okay, there are basically 2 ways of doing it. We can do it completely blindly, and we can just take a stab in the dark and see what happens, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, okay? I'm going to go ahead and advise that you don't do this, okay? What I would advise is you do your research, you understand the industry that you're looking to come into, you understand the types of customers that you need, how much money you'd like to make, and how much the industry standard for earning is in this field, okay? So every field across every industry will have a different standardized earning limit, Okay, so as a digital agency owner, you will have your own specific number for that, depending on which niche you would like to go into. Now, with this number, you can come in below or above it, depending on how well your agency does, how much work you put into it, how much time you can commit, how big your team is, how many products you sell, how many services you sell, and the list goes on. Okay, so these standardized numbers, they're just an indicator. They're not an absolute factual guarantee. Okay, so before we kick off, when we're talking about starting small, I want you to learn to take educated estimations, okay? Business is a sequence of educated estimations. Nobody can guarantee anything and nobody can know for absolute certainty what's going to happen tomorrow, okay? But what you can do is use historical data, industry standardized content, and you can understand, okay, if I make this move, what's probably going to happen next, okay? So we're working on probability and educated estimations. Next up, I would like you to take time to establish your skill set, okay? Now, this is something that comes into play massively in the digital field, massively in the marketing field, okay? Because skill set is one of these things that a lot of us have, but not many of us actually are aware that we do have indeed, okay? So trust your intelligence, trust who you are as a person, and trust your ability to learn, okay? Now, you may already have a pre-existing skill set, okay? So if you've had a corporate career, if you've been self-employed before, if you're just very, very talented, or you've had a passion in something for a long time, there's a very good chance that a lot of this information, the skill set, can be applicable in the marketing world. You just have to figure out how it's applicable, okay? So let's just say, for example, that you're amazing at maths and it was something you did really, really well in at school. Maybe you even studied it at university, but you're deciding that marketing is going to be a future career route for you, okay? So if this is the case, you need to learn how numbers and that sort of skill set and intelligence can be applicable in marketing, okay? So to reference that specifically, I'm just using a random example here. If you're great with numbers, you can be great at auditing. If you're great at auditing, you can apply that to paid advertising campaigns. If you're amazing at paid advertising campaigns, you can look at the metrics, you can look at the numbers, and you can figure out how to make businesses more money, okay? So that may not specifically be your skill set. That's just one example. You could be amazing at sales. You could be amazing at customer service. You could be great at leading people, managing people, okay? But figure out what your skill set is. Now, if your skill set needs to progress in that specific field, or you'd like a completely different skill set, depending on where you want your agency to go, then take the time to learn this skill set. But the one thing I would absolutely recommend is having an established and serious skill set before diving into a digital agency startup, okay? Because the one thing your client will expect is for you to be great at what you do. And we're going to talk about continued education, continually serving your clients throughout the day, okay? But if you do not have a skill set of some kind, you need to take your time to learn and educate yourself, okay? Now, there's nothing to say that this has to take an immense amount of time. You can move through this as quickly or slowly as you want, and this depends completely on your dedication, okay? So next up, begin with small amounts of testing on your lead generation, okay? Now, lead generation, when I refer to this, what I'm specifically talking about is how you gain new clients and new customers, okay? So lead generation is essentially a marketing strategy that brings new leads your way. So if you're familiar with this space, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're somewhat new to this space, then essentially what a lead is it's somebody who could be interested in working with you, okay? So when we're talking about lead generation, more specifically generating leads, and leads are great for your business, okay? Leads are people who could potentially give you money one day in exchange for a service that you offer. Now, when we're talking about this, okay, there are many different ways of generating leads. You can have what's called an organic campaign, and this means that essentially you don't put any money into it at all. You work organically. Therefore, you're doing free social media posts, or you're writing free emails, or you're writing free blogs, okay? Now, the other side of the coin is paid lead generation. That applies to paid advertising and other things that you might pay for, CRM systems, and the more sophisticated side over there, okay? But whichever you do, begin with small amounts of it, okay? So that the topic on number one of today's presentation is begin small, okay? Now, we're going to talk about why beginning small is relevant and important. But for now, when we're talking about lead generation specifically, I would absolutely recommend beginning with small amounts of testing on your lead generation. Okay, now the reason I say this is because you don't want to spend lots and lots of money and realize that you were going in the wrong direction. You don't want to spend lots and lots of time and realizing that you were going in the wrong direction. What I would recommend is establishing your skill set, establishing something that you're good at. So if you're an excellent writer, consider email copywriting and blog writing. Okay. Now, once you've started doing this, begin to test the results of how well these are going. Are lots of people reading your blogs, and are those blog readers turning into prospects? Are those prospects turning into qualified leads? Are those leads turning into sales, okay, or clients? So what I want you to do here, what I would like you to pay the most attention to is, when we're testing, we're understanding. And if we understand, we can then begin to implement on a greater scale. Okay, so let's just say that you start off with £100 of paid advertising content, and this goes really, really well. You then know, because of the data that you've gathered, you could times that by 2, 5, 10, and it should yield the same results. However, if you jump to the times 10 immediately before doing any testing, you run the risk of wasting all that money and with having nothing to thank for it, nothing in your business, all right, which is exactly what we don't want to happen. Okay, so number 4, by starting small, you minimize risk as you can change tactics and angles at any time. All right, so when we start small, we have a small amount of clients and we get really, really familiar. When we start small, we get really, really good at this specific niche of our skill set. Okay, again, another big advantage. It gives us time to learn and time to practice and time to become an expert. Okay. Now, the other major component of this is if you decide that what you've been doing for a month isn't actually what you want to do or what you like to do, or is not particularly effective for your clients, you can change tact without it being such a big deal. Okay, because you started small. If you dive in with 2 feet, you're then committing to that one path. You put all your money into advertising, you put all your money into this specific service, you spent tons of time creating copy for landing pages, email content, building out your CRM system, paid advertising, and the like. Okay, at this point, it's not to say it's impossible to change direction after you fully commit it, but it does become a bit more difficult. So just imagine this as a learning exercise where you're starting small because you want to see every possible angle. And once you've seen every possible angle, you can go forwards with an informed decision. Okay, so that now brings us to the end of topic number 1. As always, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to go ahead and ask any questions and take any notes, and I will rejoin you very, very shortly. All right, fantastic. So moving on to topic number 2 now, where we're going to be talking about learning as you go. Okay, so hopefully you had a moment there to write down any questions and jot down any notes. You're also going to have plenty of time to do that at the end of the webinar, so please don't worry if there's anything that you have missed. Okay, so learning as you go is the next step in making sure that you're minimizing your risk as a startup. Okay, so when I'm talking about doing this specifically, I'm going to walk you through a list of points. Number 1, be sure to monitor and correct mistakes as you move along. Okay, this is so important. And as I said right at the beginning of the presentation, if you're not monitoring your mistakes, okay, then you run the risk of making the same mistake again. So whether it was with a client, whether it was in a marketing campaign, whether it was financial, maybe you bought something that you didn't need or something that you thought was going to provide more income to the business than it actually has, this is fine. Okay, but learn from the mistake, because if you don't, you run the risk of making the same mistake over and over and over. Now, as a business coach, this is something I see very often where businesses are moving along, they made a mistake. They either don't realize they made the mistake and therefore continue to repeat that same mistake until they gain expert advice, or they are aware that they've made the mistake, but they don't take the correct actions to counteract and fix the mistake. Therefore, again, they repeat it until eventually it stops or causes more harm. Okay, neither of these are a good thing. So make sure that you're monitoring your mistakes and you're correcting them as you move along. This is one of the most productive things that you can do. A mistake is only a mistake if you do not learn from it in business. Okay, next up, understand what prospective and current clients value from you. Okay, so when I talked specifically about starting small, okay, and the numerous benefits behind this, one of the key components here is understanding what clients value from you, okay? So maybe what you'll find as you're going along is that some clients aren't particularly loving the service that you offer, or maybe you're finding that you're getting a lot of conversations with prospects, or, you know, so just to retouch base, if you're not sure what a prospect is somebody who's very interested in working with you, okay, as a client. Now, if you're finding that you're getting lots of these conversations, but in actual fact, the conversation isn't going as well as you'd hoped it would have, or they're saying things like, so close to being perfect, but not quite what I need. It could be a price point, it could be a type of service, it could be a variant of a service that you offer, it could be a specific niche, okay? But if you're not understanding what's going wrong, then again, you run the risk of repeating the same mistake, okay? If your prospects aren't picking up what you're putting down, then you need to look at how you can adjust this and move it to suit them better, because at the end of the day, client suitability is what will carry your business forward. If you don't have any clients, you don't have any money. If you don't have any money, you don't have a business, okay? Clients are number one. They are the backbone of your business. They're the ones who bring the money in. Okay, so understand what prospective and current clients value from you. There's going to be some positives and there's going to be some negatives. As you go along, by starting small, you allow yourself the time to remove the negatives and improve the positives. Okay, so focus on the wins, forget the losses and move on from them. Okay, but do not repeat the same mistake. Next, set continual and achievable objectives. Okay, we do not want to become stagnant. That's one of the most dangerous things that we can do in business, is just stopping dead, okay? Now, a great example of this is if we set ourselves an original example of, let's just say, 10 clients, okay? So we want to reach 10 monthly clients. Now, we work very, very hard to do this. We run excellent lead generation campaigns. We study, we learn, we get these clients in the door, okay? Now, once we've gotten these 10 clients, at this point, we say, oh, we can relax. This is great. We don't need any more clients. We've got 10. That's fantastic. Okay, we've reached our goal. Now, the one crucial component that could be getting missed here is the fact that most of the time, clients won't stay with you for life. Okay, now, of course, it depends on your niche, what sector you're in, how many marketing services you offer. But most of the time, clients will not stay with you for massive lengths of time. Okay, the average lifespan of a client for a digital agency could be really between 3 months and maybe 5 years. Okay, now that again is not factual. That's not from any derived data. That's purely from the top of my head, from what I've experienced and what I've seen. Okay, now whether this is 5 years or whether this is 3 months, it really doesn't matter, because the point is, at some point in time, this money is going to drop from your business. That client is going to turn around. They say, I'm closing my doors. I'm moving on to something else. I'm selling the business. Doesn't matter what they do. The end result being they're not going to keep paying you for that service anymore. Now, this is why it's important that your lead generation kicks in, okay? Because your lead generation can provide a new client when an old client leaves, okay? Now, this in business terms is what's called your churn rate, okay? So a churn rate essentially accounts for when somebody leaves, somebody new must come in. Now, a churn rate, imagine if something was churning around, you've got clients going out, you've got clients coming in. Now, if a churn rate is 10%, that's quite low, that's fine, okay? So if you're bringing in 10 clients and you're losing one, fantastic. If your churn rate is 100%, that means that one client comes in, one client goes out, meaning the business is never actually growing, okay? So you want to keep your churn rate nice and low. When you bring in a new client, you want to do your best to retain them for as long as you possibly can, keep that churn rate nice and low, okay? Now, circling back to the original point, we're looking at setting continual and achievable objectives. Okay, the reason we do this is because we will not then stagnate. Okay, we will not sit on our laurels and think everything is great, we don't need to do anything anymore. That is not only how you stop growing, that's actually how you start to reduce and come down in size. Okay, that's how you lose clients, by not actively seeking to grow the business. You must always be doing this. You must always be generating new leads. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you want to maintain and grow, you need to be generating new leads all the time. Okay, now many of us can become nervous when we start to lose clients, or when we think, okay, we've got a client, and maybe you're being misled to believe that the key to business longevity is just by keeping your clients for as long as you can. I can assure you now that this is not the correct way to view your business. Keeping clients for as long as you can is a very, very big positive and a benefit, but it is not by any means the only part of the calculation to retaining a long-term business. You must A, work to keep your clients as long as you can, and B, be bringing new clients in the door all the time, okay? Because you cannot account for other people's personal or business circumstances that may one day stop them from working with you. Now, when we come back to setting continual and achievable objectives, the reason we set these objectives is because we continually drive ourselves forward. Now, most people look to do this once every quarter. I would recommend doing the same. So a quarter is 3 months, and a quarter often starts either at the beginning of the fiscal year of the company, which will be when the company was incorporated, or it will come into the calendar year. It's up to you how you like to manage that. Nonetheless, I would advise that you actively seek to do this on a regular basis. Okay. Now, the next thing that you can do is make full use of reports and KPIs. So if you're not familiar with the term KPI, this stands for key performance indicators. Okay. Now, what this term does is it essentially allows you to track crucial metrics throughout your business so you know what's going on at all times. So let's say, for example, that you had a paid advertising campaign running with Facebook and you wanted to track A, how much money you're spending, B, how many leads you're getting for this money, C, how many views on the advert that you're getting, D, how many of these leads are booking meetings with you, and E, how many of these meetings are turning into sales. Okay, that's a very, very brief example of what a key performance indicator metric could be. Okay, now I would advise having reports in place to track everything that you're doing in your business and your startup, and also have KPI metrics in place so that you know at a glance, how well is my business doing? Am I spending £100 and getting no leads, or am I spending £100 and getting 100 leads? Okay, now I can't tell you what those KPIs will say. That's why you need to make sure that you are tracking them on a regular basis and you're keeping track of everything that you do when it comes to trying to grow your business. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, when we're taking educated estimations, we're looking at any form of approximation or guessing. Okay, we can make educated guesses based on historical data. Historical data counts as anything that happened up to 1 second ago. Okay, it's history, it's in the past. So historical data can mean a campaign you did last week, last year, last decade, doesn't matter. Okay, historical data is historical data. Now, what you would like to see is a pattern of consistent behavior. Therefore, if you, for every time over the past 10 years that you spent £100 on an advertising campaign that's brought you one new client, then guess what? The historical data says you should do that again. And that is why it's invaluable. Okay, now, I'm going to give you another little brief while before we dive on to the third and final topic of today. Okay, go ahead, ask any questions that you have for me, and do go ahead and take down some notes as well, and I'll be rejoining you very, very shortly. Hello, and welcome back to topic number 3. Okay, so let's look at now partnering with the right support. Okay, so this is the third and final aspect of minimizing your risk as a startup. And the reason that it's relevant is because most of us, if any of us, can do it alone. Okay, most of us can't do it alone. Therefore, we need to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right backing, with the right support, with the right guidance, with the right advice. Okay, now most of the time, having the right advice can stop you from making costly mistakes. Now, costly doesn't always mean financial. It can mean, in many terms of the word, things that will impact your business heavily in a negative manner. This is exactly what we don't want. Okay, so topic number 1, the support and guidance of an established partner can be invaluable. Okay, so when you're looking at minimizing your risk as a startup, what is the one clear signal that we need to do? Okay, now that answer could be gaining the advice of someone who has been there and done that. Okay, so when I say established partner, this means somebody who is either extraordinarily talented and skilled in what they do, or they have been around the block a few times in your specific niche, industry, desired angle of business, and they know exactly what you're trying to do, and they know exactly how to get you there. Somebody who has been there and has done that only needs to repeat the success that they have achieved before. Okay, it's much easier for them because they've been there, they've done that. They're not really guessing anything. They're just following the same path that they followed whenever they last did it, and it was successful. Okay, so if you can take this advice on board, you can learn from them and you can learn to go down the same path. Okay, you don't need to create the blueprint for a successful business. It's already there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Okay, just focus on doing what you need to do and being guided by somebody who is either very, very skilled or has done that exact thing themselves. Okay, next up, you can gain assistance in setting the right objectives. Okay, so a sounding board and someone to share their opinion with you, an educated opinion, more importantly, can be equally invaluable. Why? Because they will be able to tell you if the objectives that you're setting are too low, too high, in the wrong direction. Okay, Now, you may not be doing any of these things, or you could be doing all three of these things. Okay. Now, if you say, oh, I have an objective to quintuple my business over the next 6 months, okay, it's probably a bit unrealistic. Now, if you don't hit that, you can become demotivated. All right. So I love to see optimism in people, but we also need to know, one, we're making the right decision, and if the objectives that we're setting are realistic. Okay. So optimism and realism, you want a good balance between the two. All right. But you can gain assistance from these people in setting the right objectives for your business and for yourself, so that you can achieve steadily and over a very, very long-term consistent period. This is the key. Okay. We want to grow at an adequate rate over many, many, many years. Okay. We don't want to grow at 1,000% over the next 2 months and then crash. We want to just keep going up and up and up and up over an elongated period of time, therefore proving that our business is rock solid. Okay. Now, continual education and access to educational resources. Okay. This is something that's going to be invaluable for you as an individual and invaluable for your team if you have one now or if you're looking to have one. Okay. Continual education is so important, especially in the digital marketing space. Why? Because things are updating all the time. What you knew 10 years ago may not be applicable now. Okay. The truly skilled individuals of this industry are constantly learning. They're never too proud to pick up new things. They're never too proud to learn from new people. They're always working to become better at what they do, which is ultimately what excels them in their personal career and the journey of their business. Okay, so continual education and access to educational resources is something that you are going to want. Please do trust me on that. Okay, and finally, larger networks with the ability to access key data. All right, so if you exist in large networks, okay, now larger than that of yourself, okay, so you are a network of one. If you meet somebody else, a skilled partner, that's a network of two. That partner could know 10 other experts, so that's now a network of 12. Okay, the bigger your network, the more information you have access to. Now, as I have encouraged you already to study and educate yourself, all of the other people in this skilled and established network, as long as it is a correct network, will be doing just the same thing. You'll all be learning different pieces of information. You'll all be picking up new angles, new tactics, and new advice. If these are the right people, they'll be willing to share that information with you, also known as key data. Okay, if you can know and understand these elements, you can always be ahead. Now, this is something that you need to work on establishing for yourself. You need to partner yourself with someone who is either extraordinarily skilled or who's been there and done that. You need to gain assistance in setting the correct objectives. You need to continually educate yourself with good access to educational resources. And finally, you need to put yourself into large and skilled networks who can help you get to where you want to go. Okay, so please take your time to ask any questions that you may have and take down any notes. I'm going to do a quick summary now. Okay, so to recap on topic number one, when you're starting a business, start small, minimize your risk. This allows you all the time in the world to change direction if you need to. Number two, learn as you go, monitor and correct your mistakes. It's only a mistake if you do not learn from it. Number three, form partnerships. Guidance and education are two invaluable tools in the business world. Okay, so if you write down nothing else from today, write down these three components in the recap section. Okay, now what we're going to do is I'm going to go and grab the questions that I've had from all of you wonderful attendees in today's presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today on this webinar, and I hope that you enjoyed the content. All right, so just give me one moment. I'm going to go ahead and get the questions up. If you would like to look into us a little bit more and see a bit more what we're about, you can go ahead and visit iob-business.com, and all the information that you need will be up on there. Okay, so let me just grab the questions that I had from today's session. Okay, excellent. So very, very good question in here that I've just had. Now, this question says, when you say start small, how small do you mean? Okay, now it's an excellent question, because I could mean £10 a year, I could mean £10,000 a year. Okay, now the answer here is that this is relative depending on the leader of the startup. Okay, now essentially what I mean by this is to not throw everything that you have into it in one go. Okay, so look at your resources, look at the time that you have, and look at the directions that you want to go in, and understand the skill set that you have. Okay, so there's a lot of research that you'll need to do. Now, to give you a brief summary, you'll need to make sure that you have an established skill set and something that can be sold, or you'll need to understand how it's applicable to a sellable service. Okay, so focus on this. Understand who your ideal target market is, okay? Who's going to buy your service, who can afford your service. Then you need to start researching lead generation campaigns to find these types of people. Now, obviously, it's not as simple as 1, 2, 3, but for the purposes of this brief summary, this is what I'm telling you, okay? So make sure that when you are investing in this, you're investing time, you're investing money, to do it in small segments, okay? So if you have £10,000 in the bank, start by spending, let's just say, for example, say 10%, okay? Keep a lot of what you have and start testing the water with about 10% of what you need, okay? So go ahead and gain the data, the historical data that you need from that, and just start learning, start figuring out the types of people that want to buy from you, okay? Now, if you dive in with the full 10,000, you've made that decision. And if that's the wrong decision, then what do you have left? Nothing, okay? So that's not the way you want to go. You want to always make sure that you're taking small and educated steps. A fantastic question, and I hope that that answer is clear. All right, excellent. Another great question. So this is, how can I reduce mistakes? Okay, so very, very simple answer for this one. Learn from the mistakes that have been made. Okay, learn from experts around you. And finally, I would say create what are called standard operating procedures to complete processes more efficiently. Okay, now I'm going to run you through exactly what each one of these things mean. Okay, so first of all, learn from mistakes that you made in the past or that you have just made. So have a good think. Have you ever made any big costly mistakes, and did you improve them or change them at the time? How did you improve them? Can you apply that same theory to the mistakes that you're making now? Okay, number 2, learn from experts. Now, I don't want you to just learn anything from these experts. I want you to ask these experts, if you have a partner or somebody who's very skilled in the trade, I want you to speak to them and say, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've ever made? And how can I stop myself from making the same ones? Okay, so that's the second way that you can do it. Third way that you can do it is, once you make a mistake, okay, and you've absorbed this information, you're aware that it's a mistake, you can create something called a standard operating procedure. Okay, so a standard operating procedure is essentially a standardized template that shows someone, i.e. you or somebody around you, how to do a certain task in a certain optimal manner each time that it is done. Okay, now what SOPs do is they create effectiveness and efficiency. So if I ask you to do a task that you've never done before, I should be able to hand you this SOP, and you should be able to do that without having to ask me any questions. Now, if there's a mistake that's been made because there is no SOP, go ahead and make an SOP. If there's a mistake that's been made because the SOP was followed, then you're aware now that the SOP is incorrect and needs to be updated. This is the most simple thing that you can do, and it is so effective. But another fantastic question. Thank you very much indeed for asking. All right, so let me just have a look and check that we don't have any more questions on today's session. No, okay, I think we're all good. So that being said, thank you very much indeed for the questions. Thank you more so for spending time with me on today's webinar. And I very, very, very much look forward to seeing you again on the next iOB business webinar. Have a great week, have a great weekend, and bye for now.